Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Back in 1968, I was 23 and had just bought my first house in a quiet neighborhood outside of town. I worked at the local factory during the week, but weekends were for fixing up my property. The yard was a mess when I moved in, overgrown grass, fallen branches everywhere, and flower beds that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. What made me different from most folks my age was my German Shepherd. I'd gotten her as a puppy 2 years earlier and spent countless hours training her. She knew basic commands like sit and stay, but I'd also taught her protection commands. My father had been in the military and always said a well-trained dog was better than any security system. People in the neighborhood knew about my dog's training, and honestly, I was proud of it. The neighborhood kids would sometimes help me with the yard work for a few dollars. There was this one boy who lived 3 streets over, a 15-year-old who was always polite and worked harder than most adults I knew. His family didn't have much money, so I tried to give him work whenever I could. On this Saturday morning, he showed up right on time like always. We spent about 4 hours raking leaves and clearing brush. The kid never complained even when we had to move some heavy branches that had fallen during the last storm. When we finished, I invited him inside for something to eat and drink. He thanked me politely and said that sounded really good. We went into my kitchen and I made him a sandwich and poured us both some cold milk. My dog lay by the door, relaxed but always alert. We were talking about what we'd tackle the next weekend when there was a loud knock at my front door. I opened it to find 2 men in plain clothes standing on my porch. They looked official, but something felt off about the whole situation. The first man demanded that they had come to pick up the boy for questioning. When I asked what for, the second man said it was police business and they needed to take him down to the station. The boy had gone pale behind me. I could see he was scared, but I knew this kid. He was one of the most honest teenagers I'd ever met. I asked to see their badges and a warrant. The first man told me they didn't need a warrant and ordered me to step aside. I refused, telling them I wouldn't let them take any kid anywhere without proper paperwork. The second man tried to push past me into my house. That's when my dog stepped between us, letting out a low growl that made both men freeze. Her lips were pulled back, showing her teeth, and every muscle in her body was tense. The second man demanded I call off my dog. I told him she would stay right where she was until they showed me a warrant or got off my property. They looked at each other, clearly not expecting resistance. After a few tense moments, they backed down my porch steps. The first man warned me that this wasn't over. I told him it better be. After they left, I turned to the boy who was shaking. I told him I was taking him home right away so we could talk to his mother. The walk to his house was quiet. When his mother answered the door, I could see the worry in her eyes immediately. I explained that some men had just come to my house wanting to take her son for questioning, and they wouldn't show badges or a warrant. Her mother's face fell, and she said she was afraid this might happen. She explained that her son had a paper route, delivering newspapers to about 30 houses every morning before school. A few days earlier, one of his customers had accused him of breaking into her house and stealing jewelry. The problem was the alleged break-in had happened during school hours, and the boy's teachers had confirmed he was in class all day. His mother told me the woman had a friend on the police force and had been threatening to have her son arrested even though they had proved he was in school when it happened. I asked for the woman's name, but his mother said she'd rather not say because she didn't want to cause more trouble. I told her respectfully that trouble had already found her, and those men had no right to try to take her son without proper procedure. I left their house feeling angry. This whole situation stank of someone using their connections to intimidate a good kid and his family. I decided to walk over to my mother's house to tell her what had happened. She lived just 2 streets away, and the walk usually helped me clear my head. I was crossing the street about halfway to her house when a car pulled up quickly beside me. A man got out and approached me fast. The man ordered me to come with him. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm hard. I immediately called for my dog, who had been following me at a distance like she always did. I shouted for my dog to get him. My dog launched herself at the man, clamping down on his arm with a bite that made him scream and let go of me immediately. He stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding arm. The man yelled that he was a police detective and demanded I call off my dog. I asked him why he didn't identify himself before grabbing me. Instead of answering, he reached for his gun. The moment I saw him draw it, I scooped up my dog and ran to my mother's house. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't stop until I was safely inside. My mother took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I told her that some detective had just tried to grab me off the street and then pulled a gun on my dog. She asked if he had shown me a badge. I said not until after my dog bit him. My mother immediately called our family lawyer, who told us to file a report with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. Within a few hours, we learned that the detective had to get 12 stitches in his arm and was being investigated for improper procedure. The lawyer explained that officers can't just grab people off the street without identifying themselves first, especially when they're not in uniform. The detective had violated several protocols and could face disciplinary action. 2 days later, the boy's mother called to tell me that the charges against her son had been quietly dropped. The woman who had accused him admitted she might have been mistaken about the timing. Her friend on the police force was suddenly much less eager to pursue the case. The detective who had grabbed me received a formal reprimand and was required to take additional training on proper procedure. He never bothered me or the boy's family again. My mom and I keep to ourselves most of the time. We live in a decent neighborhood where nothing too crazy usually happens. My mom works 2 jobs to support us since my dad passed away 3 years ago, and she avoids confrontation. She's from the northern part of our country, so she has this thick accent that some people around here don't like, but she's lived here for over 20 years now. The whole mess started because we were helping out my cousin. She's become this big social media influencer with around 40,000 followers. She was staying with us for a few days while visiting family, and that particular evening she was doing one of her live video chats with her followers. You know how these things work. She sits there talking to her phone while hundreds of people watch and comment. My mom needed to run to the store before it closed, and my cousin asked if she could come along to finish her live stream in the car. She told my mom that her followers loved when she showed them different places around town. My mom agreed because she's always been supportive of my cousin's career, even if she doesn't really understand the whole social media thing. We were parked right outside our house while my cousin wrapped up her live video. She was in the back seat, phone propped up, chatting away with her audience about some makeup products or whatever. My mom was being patient, waiting for her to finish because she knows how important these things are for my cousin's work. After about 10 minutes, my cousin said she was almost done, so my mom started backing out of our driveway. Our street is usually pretty quiet, especially in the evening. My mom looked both ways like she always does. She's an incredibly careful driver, maybe even too careful sometimes. There wasn't a single car in sight when she started pulling out. We were maybe halfway into the street when this car came flying around the corner. This thing was going at least 130 kilometers per hour in what's clearly marked as a 60 zone. The speed limit signs are everywhere on our street because there are a lot of families with kids. My mom saw the car coming and immediately tried to back up, but there was no time. The speeding car hit their brakes, and I could hear the tires screeching, but they still slammed right into the side of our car. The impact wasn't huge because they did slow down some, but it was enough to leave a nasty dent in our door and shake us all up pretty good. My cousin was still holding her phone, and I could see her followers in the chat asking if everyone was okay. She quickly told them she had to go and ended the stream. The other driver got out of her car, and right away I could tell something was off. She was maybe in her 40s, dressed in expensive clothes, but she was stumbling a little as she walked over to us. When she got to my mom's window, the smell hit me immediately. Alcohol. Strong alcohol. It was like she had taken a bath in it. Karen started screaming at my mom through the window, calling her an idiot and asking what she was thinking pulling out like that. My mom was still shaken up from the collision, but she rolled down her window to try to talk. She apologized and said she had looked both ways and didn't see anyone, then mentioned that Karen had been going very fast. Karen refused to accept any blame and told my mom not to dare blame her for what she called my mom's stupidity. She asked my mom if she even knew how to drive and where she had learned, making nasty comments about third world driving schools. That's when she started making comments about my mom's accent, calling her names I won't repeat here. My mom's English is perfectly fine, she's been speaking it longer than I've been alive, but Karen kept mocking the way she pronounced certain words. Karen announced she was calling the police right away and said my mom was going to pay for every scratch on her car. She pulled out her phone and dialed while continuing to yell at my mom through the window. My mom just sat there taking it, trying to stay calm like she always does when people are rude to her about her accent. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. One officer got out and walked over to Karen first, and I noticed they seemed to know each other. They were talking in low voices, and I saw him nod a few times while she pointed at our car. When the officer came over to talk to my mom, Karen followed him and started shouting again. She told the officer that my mom had just pulled right out in front of her without even looking and said she could have killed someone. My mom tried to explain that wasn't what happened, saying she had checked carefully before backing out and that Karen was driving way too fast for this neighborhood. Karen called my mom's explanation complete garbage and told the officer he couldn't trust people like her. Every time my mom tried to explain what actually happened, Karen would start screaming over her. The officer looked annoyed but not at Karen, at us. It was becoming clear pretty quickly that this wasn't going to be a fair situation. While this circus was going on, I remembered my cousin had been doing her live stream when the accident happened. I walked over to her and asked if she had caught any of it on her video. She told me she actually had, saying she was still streaming when it happened, and you could see the whole thing in the background, including the car speeding around the corner. I told her to save that video because I had a feeling we were going to need it. She said she was already downloading it. When I got back to where my mom and the officer were talking, things had gotten worse. The cop was basically ignoring everything my mom said, while nodding along with Karen's version of events. He told my mom that, from what he could see, it looked like she had pulled out without checking for oncoming traffic. He said she would need to contact her insurance company and work out payment for the other vehicle's damages. My mom protested, saying Karen had been speeding and pointing out this was a 60-kilometer zone where Karen had to have been going twice that fast. The officer said he didn't witness the accident himself and there was no evidence of speeding. He claimed it appeared my mom had failed to yield the right-of-way. My mom was getting upset now, which almost never happens. She's usually so patient with people, even when they're being unfair. She said this wasn't right and that she wanted to file a complaint, telling him he wasn't even listening to what she was saying. The officer told her she was free to do that, but instead of giving her information about how to file a complaint, he just walked back to his car and drove away. Karen stood there with this smug look on her face. Karen told my mom that maybe next time she'd think twice before pulling out in front of people who could actually afford their cars. Then she did something I had never seen before. She actually spit at my mom through the car window. Spit, like some kind of animal. She told my mom that she had no idea who she was dealing with and that her husband had connections in this town. She got back in her expensive car and drove off, leaving us sitting there with a damaged vehicle and no help from the police. My mom was quiet on the drive home, but I could tell she was furious. She's not the type to just let something like this go, especially when someone treats her badly because of where she's from. She told me we weren't letting this slide and that she was going to sue Karen. I asked if she thought the video my cousin got would help, and she said we were about to find out. My mom found a lawyer who takes cases like this and explained the whole situation. The lawyer was interested, especially when we showed him the video my cousin had saved. You could clearly see Karen's car flying around the corner way too fast and hitting us, while my mom was backing out slowly and carefully. Karen must have thought she had gotten away with it because she actually filed her own lawsuit against us first. She claimed we had caused thousands in damages to her car, that we didn't have proper insurance, and that the whole thing had caused her emotional trauma. The nerve of this woman was unbelievable. The court date was on a school day, so I couldn't go. But my mom told me everything that happened when she got home. My mom's lawyer presented the video evidence first. It clearly showed Karen speeding and hitting us, not the other way around. Karen's lawyer tried to argue that the video angle was misleading and that my mom should have been more careful regardless. But then Karen decided to speak up for herself, and that's when everything fell apart for her. My mom said Karen started getting agitated when the judge was asking her questions about the accident. Karen suddenly blurted out, asking what the hell everyone expected her to do and saying, "You can't ask a drunk person to do more than that." She accused us of just being jerks because we didn't have insurance. According to my mom, the courtroom went completely silent. Karen's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge just stared at her with his mouth open. The judge asked Karen to clarify if she was saying she had been intoxicated at the time of the accident. Karen confirmed that yes, she had just come from her husband's company party. The judge said he didn't think he needed to hear anything else. That was it. Game over. Karen had just admitted to driving drunk and causing an accident in front of a judge while trying to sue us for damages. It turns out Karen's husband is some football player, and they had been at a team party that night. She had been drinking heavily and decided to drive herself home instead of getting a ride. When she hit our car, she was completely wasted but thought she could intimidate us into taking the blame. We won everything. The judge awarded us money for our car repairs, additional damages for the harassment and racist comments, and even more for the trauma of dealing with the whole situation. Karen got hit with charges for drunk driving, reckless endangerment, and a bunch of other things. She ended up with jail time and probation. My mom's lawyer did some digging and found out that the police officer who responded to our call was actually friends with Karen's husband. They had planned the whole thing. Karen would cause an accident while drunk, and her cop friend would show up and blame the other driver. The lawyer found evidence that they had done this before to other families in our area. The police department launched an internal investigation, and that crooked cop ended up losing his job and facing criminal charges too. Several other cases got reopened where he had obviously lied in his reports to protect his friends. My mom used some of the settlement money to take a vacation for the first time in years. My cousin's video probably saved us thousands in legal fees and proved that sometimes social media can actually be useful for something important. I was 17 when I met him. Just a regular high school student dealing with epilepsy that had already held me back once in 9th grade. My memory was terrible because of my medical condition, so I wrote everything down in notebooks. I was this tiny thing back then, 5'2" and 120 pounds, living in a small town where everyone knew everyone. He was 22, claimed to be a former Marine, good-looking, smart, funny, everything a 17-year-old girl thought she wanted. We talked for weeks before our first real date, and those dates were amazing. He made me feel special, like I was the most important person in the world. In May, he introduced me to his 3-year-old daughter on her birthday. She was absolutely precious. That same day, I met his mother for the first time. Let's call her Karen. From the moment I walked in, she looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. She barely acknowledged me and spent the whole party making snide comments. Despite Karen's attitude, I was head over heels. When he proposed early in our relationship, I said yes without hesitation. Young and dumb, I thought this was my fairy tale. I was still in 11th grade, but I felt so grown up and mature. Against my parents' wishes, I moved out and relocated to a city about an hour away to be with him. I had to transfer to this massive high school that terrified me after being used to small town schools my whole life. Right after I turned 18, my doctors put me on a new seizure medication that made me gain 80 pounds in a month. I went from that tiny girl to someone I didn't recognize in the mirror. The weight gain sent me into a deep depression. For an entire year, I refused to take pictures with anyone. I stopped dressing nicely and lived in basketball shorts, sweatpants, and oversized t-shirts. People started congratulating my mother on becoming a grandmother because they assumed I was pregnant. That's how drastically my body had changed. We got an apartment together. I worked at the local home improvement store while he worked at a restaurant. 7 months after moving in together, we got married. I graduated high school and started working full-time. That's when things began to unravel. He started working 20 plus hours of overtime at what was supposed to be just a little fast food job. Then he told me the truth about his military service. He wasn't honorably discharged like he'd claimed. He never even made it out of boot camp because he'd hung another recruit out of a barracks window by his feet during a fight. He was dishonorably discharged for violence. I realized I'd married someone who was not only violent, but also a liar. By then, I already had his initials tattooed on my wrist, which I now deeply regretted. He started coming home with more and more money, way more than someone working at a fast food place should have. We furnished our apartment with expensive things, a 55-inch television, brand new furniture, multiple game consoles. I should have questioned where all this money was coming from, but I didn't. That's when Karen really ramped up her harassment. She started accusing me of being a gold digger, claiming I was taking advantage of her sweet son. She began messaging my mother constantly, posting on social media that I was cheating on him. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was calling me a gold digger while her son was literally stealing money. Karen would tell my mother that I was nothing but a gold digger who had trapped her son. My mother would defend me, saying that was completely untrue and Karen needed to stop spreading lies. But Karen would just continue claiming that girls like me always cheat and that she was sure I was being unfaithful. Meanwhile, Karen's boyfriend was secretly texting me, asking if I wanted to have a relationship with him behind her back. I screenshot every single message he sent. One evening, my husband came home looking nervous. His boss had called him to come in for a meeting the next morning. He dropped me off at work, which was right across the parking lot from his restaurant. A few minutes later, I watched the police car pull up to his workplace. When it left, I could see him in the back seat. I found out he'd embezzled over $3,000 from his employer. I immediately moved back home with my parents, but Karen's harassment didn't stop. She kept calling me names and spreading lies, while her boyfriend continued trying to proposition me. That's when I decided to get to the bottom of everything. I retrieved his phone from the police and started going through it. What I found made me physically sick. He'd been cheating on me with a 16-year-old girl. But that wasn't even the worst part. He'd created fake social media accounts and was messaging my 12-year-old sister, asking her for inappropriate favors. My family-oriented heart shattered. I would die for my little sister, and this monster was trying to hurt her. I kept digging and found dating apps with hundreds of messages to different women, asking about relationships and marriage while he was married to me. He was living multiple lives. I carefully screenshot everything. Every conversation with the 16-year-old, every disgusting message to my little sister, every dating profile, every lie he told. I organized it all methodically. First, I sent some screenshots to my mother so she'd understand what kind of person he really was. Then I sent everything to Karen, screenshots of her boyfriend's inappropriate messages to me, evidence of her son's relationship with the 16-year-old, and most importantly, proof that he'd been targeting my 12-year-old sister. I arranged to meet Karen in person to show her everything. When she arrived and I handed her the printed screenshots, her face went through the most satisfying transformation I've ever witnessed. First confusion, then shock, then complete disgust and disappointment. Karen looked at the messages and said she didn't understand what she was seeing. I explained that her sweet son had been messaging my little sister, who was only 12 years old. Karen's face went pale and she kept saying she was sorry, apologizing over and over for everything she had said about me. I also told her that her boyfriend had been harassing me while she was calling me a cheater. She broke up with her boyfriend immediately and kicked him out. He ended up homeless on the streets, far from his home state. But I wasn't done. I took all the evidence about the messages to minors straight to the police. He was already facing 3 months in jail for embezzlement, but now he got 2 additional years in prison and had to register as a sex offender for life. While he was in prison, he somehow met another 16-year-old girl and moved in with her and her parents when he was released. His own mother and brothers had disowned him and cut all contact. He lost any custody or visitation rights with his daughter. I still had all those screenshots saved in my email. I tracked down the parents of the girl he was living with, and sent them everything. I wrote them an email explaining that I felt they should know about the person living in their home, and I attached screenshots of conversations he had with minors, including my 12-year-old sister. They kicked him out immediately. Karen's boyfriend ended up just as homeless and lost everything when she discovered his true character. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.